When you think of North Korea, you probably have a very specific image in mind. That's because all we as foreigners know of North Korea is what the government stages for the world. The real and hard life in North Korea actually looks quite different. In this video, we want to show you 10 shocking images that the government of North Korea wanted to hide. You can see how unbelievable the life of the people in the country is, or with which abstruse methods the North Korean military is trained. So let's start right away. We start with the video with probably the most dangerous act you can dare to do in North Korea, and that is to flee the country. Anyone who tries to cross the border without permission is immediately stopped by heavily armed soldiers. Despite these circumstances, one North Korean soldier's desire for freedom was so strong in 2017 that he got in his car and wanted to reach the democratic South at any cost. To accomplish this, he initially drove his Jeep inconspicuously into a restricted military area just outside the border. However, it was not long before he was spotted by his comrades and they gave chase. When he could already see the border, however, something happened that almost ended in disaster. He drove in front of a tree. Then, severely dazed, he was forced to continue the rest of the way on foot. His pursuers, however, were close on his heels and even opened fire. Although all the odds were against him, he managed to jump over a wall into South Korea with his last ounce of strength. But at first glance, it all seemed for naught. In fact, he initially remained motionless on South Korean soil. Miraculously, he survived this action, but for the North Korean government, this incident was an embarrassment. Many of you probably know the propaganda shots of the North Korean government of full stadiums, or the impressive skyscrapers in Pyongyang. That much of it is just a facade is probably best shown by the example of the legendary Ryugyong Hotel, which was built in 1987 on a gigantic area as large as the Vatican. For a long time, North Korea promoted it as the largest and most luxurious hotel in the world. The truth, however, is different. In numerous secretly filmed videos, you can see how the hotel is deserted and in a catastrophic condition. Until today, no one has moved in. The whole hotel looks very impressive from the outside, but due to construction defects, it has never been officially opened until today. Especially in the top floor is partly only the shell. Continuing with a violent shot that shows something that seems like from the Middle Ages, a young activist who escaped from North Korea filmed a court case. It is particularly frightening when you see what the trial is about and the way it is being conducted. In the video, you can see how hundreds of young North Koreans are squeezed together in a military barracks and have their offenses read out by a soldier. In addition to classic offenses such as theft or insult, one can also see a North Korean being sentenced to a long prison term for watching South Korean movies with a friend. For such trivial offenses, the defendants are also additionally humiliated in such public trials so that everyone can see what happens when you break the law. Next, we'll show you a clip that Kim Jong-un and his government also want to keep secret at all costs, and out of embarrassment. While North Korea brags incessantly that it is militarily one of the strongest countries in the world with the most destructive weapons, the training is quite different. In fact, instead of training its soldiers on tanks and rifles like other nations, the men have to undergo very bizarre and amateurish training. You see North Korean soldiers running through stone slabs with their heads, getting hit on the hand with a hammer, or freeing themselves from metal chains like in a magic show. Although the 1.2 million North Korean soldiers probably have other skills as well, these tricks are unlikely to get them very far in a real conflict. However, North Korea is not only concerned with keeping recordings secret from the rest of the world, but also with presenting only what it wants its people to see. In sports, for example. Although international sporting events with North Korean participation are not shown on television, the government nevertheless claims that its teams are the best in the world. What happens when the performance of the country's athletes is presented to the people became clear in 2010. At that time, the country qualified for a Soccer World Cup for the first time. While the people were promised the World Cup title, it became clear to everyone during the preliminary round matches that this would never happen. The people were so disillusioned, especially with a 7-0 defeat to Portugal, that the government quickly decided not to show the remaining games. It was said afterward that despite the defeat, North Korea had won the rest of the tournament and were runners-up behind Portugal. But in reality, the national players were severely punished upon their return and humiliated by the government for disappointing the country too many times. Now let's move on to a completely unique shot. In these videos, you see for the first time what life in the countryside in North Korea is really like. This footage shows how young people have to wash themselves in rivers, children search for food in nature, and adults sit desperately on the street. Even though Kim Jong-un proudly claimed that his people enjoy great prosperity, about a quarter of all North Koreans are said to be severely malnourished, and over 30% of the people have no jobs at all. Work in North Korea is also very different from what is understood by work in the West. In this secret video, you can see a 23-year-old woman whose face is badly marked. She has no parents and has to do hard work in the fields for over 20 hours a day using medieval tools. In the recording, she explains about her life in a weak voice. This footage, which by the way was taken by a journalist over 10 years ago, also shows another woman resisting the dictates of North Korean officials who force her to work. Here you can see her scolding one of the men loudly. Now that you've seen some of the violent conditions in North Korea, you might think it couldn't get much worse. But what we're going to show you now brings back memories of one of the darkest times in history. It is about the prisons in North Korea, where prisoners are not only held but also forced to work. Currently, almost 500,000 people are said to be in such labor camp prisons, and even though there is hardly any footage from inside, a few years ago, a Western camera team was in a now abandoned North Korean labor camp, which is nowadays located on Russian territory. The labor camps are reminiscent of camps from the Third Reich or the Soviet Union, and much like in the past, people are pushed to their personal limits through hard work. Except for this photo, there are no other pictures of today's camps. Now we come to the subject of missiles. Almost every month, the Army tests new missiles and provokes its neighbors Japan and South Korea again and again. What the regime does not need, however, is a missile test that fails because of poor quality. Time and again, the American media report on how a North Korean missile exploded shortly after launch and was thus tested for absolutely nothing, similar to this video. Finally, we will show you some footage that was deliberately presented to the world by North Korea. The government tries everything to show the alleged loyalty of its population. Among other things, these pictures of the mourning people were put into the world after Kim Jong-un's father, Kim Jong-il, passed away. Here, even the state news anchor wept.
장군님의 성스러운 혁명 실력과
In the same way, the country is trying to advertise itself through targeted social media propaganda. For example, the TikTok account XHG1688, which according to some sources is operated directly by the North Korean government, has been circulating through the net for several years. On this account, the world gets to see breathtaking footage of North Korea's nature and happy people. However, as you've noticed from the other footage we've shown you today, most of these videos might not be true, and North Korea is still trying to keep numerous footage secret from the world. Write in the comments your thoughts on North Korea. Leave a like if you found the video interesting, and see you next time here at Wise Fool.